Can't sit. Can't sit still. It's just so arranged for both ways. I mean, we work great together.
Well, I guess these are the traditional people. That's these it's a choir universe here.
Oh, is that right? But they belong to different churches.
Oh, yeah, it's just like, it's the game.
A couple of days before,
It was at one time.
just make sure you
No,
there's
as you He's been a lot of places.
My dad, just for fun. See, that's why I stopped here for the crazy stuff. It's because I think like, oh, I'll have more space. I have more person. Yeah, exactly.
some of it for 20 years. First go forward, second year.
I'm Kyle. I answer to anything except late for dinner. My friend still thinks that it was just grape juice, that it was called wine because it was just what they called it. It was just oh no. And she just never had a pink label.
So more on my
I get lost down here. I know the area. I would sit some bus on here.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Maundy Thursday service here at FCC. I'm so glad that you took the time from your busy schedules to come here this night. This night, of course, we remember the institution of the Lord's Supper, and we'll be able to reenact that around these different tables. And I hope that in the time to come, as we get to that moment, that you can really envision what it must have been like for those disciples and Jesus around that table. What must they have been feeling around that table? What must have been going through their hearts and minds and souls as Jesus, sat as he's about to get arrested and shares that bread and that cup and the meaning that it has. My hope for this is that you can deepen your meaning of the Eucharist, the Lord's Supper, and you can carry that with you over the next several days. Let us open in prayer. Gracious God, we praise you for this sacrament, the gift of your Son to his church. As we share this supper together, may we know his strength and enter the fullness of his life and love. Infinite, intimate God, this night you kneel before your friends and wash our feet. Bound together in your love, trembling, we drink your cup and watch. Amen.
Let's stand for the day.
And our reading for this evening comes from the Gospel according to John, chapter 13, beginning with the first verse. Now before the festival of the Passover, Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart from this world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. The devil had already put into the heart of Judas, son of Simon Iscariot, to betray him. And during supper, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going to God, got up from the table, took off his outer robe, and tied a towel around himself. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet, and wiped them with the towel that was tied around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus answered, "You do not know what I am doing, but later you will understand." Peter said to him, "You will never wash my feet." Jesus answered, "Unless I wash you, you have no share with me." Simon Peter said to him, "Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head." Jesus said to him, "One who has bathed does not need to wash except for the feet, but is entirely clean. And you are clean, though not all of you." For he knew who was to betray him. For this reason he said, "Not all of you are clean." After he had washed their feet, had greater than the one who sent them. If you know these things, you are blessed if you do them. When he had gone out, Jesus said, "Now the Son of Man has been glorified, and God has been glorified in him. If God has been glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself, and will glorify him at once. Little children, I am with you only a little longer. You will look for me, and, as I said to the Jews, so I say to you, where I am going, you cannot come. I give you a new commandment, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also should love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." Here ends our reading. Well, I wanted to share this passage rather than the passage on the institution of the Lord's Supper, in part because I've never actually...
Keep going, you're good.
I never actually preached on this passage on Maundy, Thursday. And yet, the reason where we get the name Maundy, Thursday from is actually this passage. The Latin mondo mandare means to command. And here Jesus gives his final commandment to his disciples, that they are to love one another as he has loved them. And that indeed is, when it's done right, the mark of a Christian community, the love that people show one another. And one of the things that I will say is that the thing I am proudest of FCC as a church is the way in which the people of this church and people in this room care for one another. I actually brought this up the other day when I was talking to someone about all of you, not just all of you, but the others too in FCC. And I said there's nothing that makes a pastor prouder than seeing that. You know, I saw it during, especially during the pandemic, when you had such a difficult time for so many people. You know, the folks who spent time to deliver flowers to those at Christmas and Easter, those who had phone calls or letters, those who sent emails, the growth groups and some of the connections that were made there, and some of the friendships that were made there, the small acts of bringing food or other things, to care for one another just inspired me and continues to inspire me. And I think one of the great blessings of the pandemic is that there was that caring that the congregation showed to one another that I still see going on, and I hope will carry on. We're doing, and again, we aspire to do just what's here in this text. And the text it's hard not to be moved also by the intimacy of this text. I mean, what could be more intimate than someone washing your dirty feet? You know, we were talking before about, should we have a foot washing? You know, I've only done one of those before, and it was like universal, no. In spite of the fact that Jesus commands people to do it in this text. Because there's something about that that just feels so, but that's the amazing thing. Here's Jesus doing that to his disciples. There's that element of physical touch, also on the ugly side of life. And there Jesus is setting that model for all of us. That's one thing I do enjoy seeing those photos. That's one thing that the Pope does, and I've always so impressed with. Seeing those photos of Pope Francis on his knees washing the feet of prisoners. And again, I remember seeing one photo where there were prisoners who were also non-Christians, several of them. You know, just that act of discipleship and modeling that type of love. It's something that all of us can aspire to. But it also brings up one of the, in terms of this, this comment of Peter, one of the hardest things. For many of us, it's easier to care for others than let ourselves be cared for. Just like it's easier to wash someone else's feet in a certain way than have someone wash yours. There's this sense of vulnerability that comes there when you allow yourself to be cared for. Usually, the strong people are the people who get to care for others. Only those who are weak get cared for. But we all have moments where we need to actually receive that care. And also it can be such a gift to the caregiver to be able to receive it with grace. And that's one of, I think, the challenges that we all have, not just to be good caregivers, but also good care receivers. When someone's trying to do something nice, to say thank you, and really feel it and really appreciate it. And that's not an easy thing to do. I remember one of the moments that sticks in my head more than any other for my father's cancer treatment was when we were up in New Hampshire. Again, this was 15 years ago. And it was just the two of us up in New Hampshire. I don't know where my mother was or my siblings, but it was just the two of us in the house. And my father, the treatments that he were on, the treatments that he had, one of the things that gave him these, very uncomfortable blisters. And so at one point, when he got so uncomfortable, he really couldn't sleep. And he woke me up and said, I need to go to the hospital. So we went to the hospital at 1 in the morning, 20 minutes away, so this could get cared for. And, it was too uncomfortable for my father to drive. And there was this incredible vulnerability that my father showed in that time to me that I had never seen from him in my entire life that I've known him. And I felt closer to him then than I think I ever felt in my entire life at that moment driving into the hospital. And then sitting with him for several hours in the emergency room, and we had the sort of blisters taken care of, and we drove back. There was just this incredible moment of sharing and openness, and I always treasured that. It does speak to this same thing in this passage, that sense of allowing ourselves to be vulnerable, and what a gift it could be to the other person. To be able to say, yes, I need to be cared for, thank you. There's that intimacy, that vulnerability. That's one thing that, again, we have done, and I'd love us to continue to do. In the classic communion liturgy, there's a moment that we tend not to have in our service, but is a great moment, which is the passing of the peace. And it goes actually back to the Gospel of John. If you recall, at the end of the Gospel of John, when the resurrected Jesus appears to his disciples, he shares a sign of Christ's peace, or of God's peace with them. The peace of God be with you. And that this is a symbol for Christians before communion of reconciliation with one another before they come to the table. This sense of Christian community, this sense of intimacy, this sense of connection. In fact, early Christians would oftentimes share a kiss. Now, I'm not saying we should necessarily share a kiss here again. But nevertheless, one of the things what I'd like to do before we move on, is to spend some time silently and to pray for some of the people in this room. I'd like you to look around the room and see if there are people in this room that you know that you can pray for. I'd like you to pray for some of the people in this room, and in addition to praying for people in this room, other people in the congregation that you want to lift up a prayer for. Prayer shapes us as individuals, it shapes us as Christians, and the more we can lift up in prayer the needs of others, the more it can open our hearts to them and care for them. So let us take a moment to pray for those who are in this room, and pray for those who are in our congregation.
This song we're going to sing has been sung by Christian communities for over a millennium. And the part you sing is the top line there, and we're going to sing in Latin. We're going to chant in Latin. So I'm going to give you a little bit of preparation. Would you say ubi caritas?
Ubi caritas,
Et amor.
et amor,
Deus ibi est.
Deus ibi est.
Very simply, where there is charity and love, God is there. The refrain that we all sing together goes like this. Ubi caritas et amor, Deus ibi est. Nothing to it. So watch this. Repeat after me. Ubi caritas. Listen first. Ubi caritas et amor. Listen one time. Ooh, just listen to me one time. Ubi, listen to me one time. Ubi caritas et amor. Everyone. It's better and better. All right. So every time we do it, we'll sing it twice, and then I'll chant the rest of it, and then when it says we all sing refrain, we'll come back and do that again. So let's do that twice. Ubi caritas. Ubi caritas et amor, Deus mies. Ubi caritas et amor, Deus mies. Congregavit nos idum, Christi amor, exultebus et ipso, iucundemus, timeamus et amemus, Deum vivus, et ex corde divigamus, non si